Hello everybody, welcome to the Truth Proof YouTube page. Now, Truth Proof, for anybody who's new to this channel, we invoke stories of the unusual. It could be supernatural, paranormal, it could be UFOs and missing people, anything unusual what happens in the East Yorkshire area. This is what the Truth Proof YouTube channel is all about. Now, Truth Proof is run actually by Paul Sinclair. He's an established writer with 3 books out there and another one in the making. So, today we've got a guest speaker, and our guest speaker is Philip Kinsella. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about Philip, and you can probably see behind me there's a couple of books from Philip and his identical twin brother Ronald. Now, Philip is an experiencer, he's an abductee, and he's a widely acclaimed clairvoyant medium. He's won awards for his mediumship. He's the author of numerous books, some of which has been authored by his twin brother, and his twin brother is a fantastic illustrator. The illustrations he has done, we will be featuring tonight on the show, round about the hour mark. There'll be a little video there showcasing Ronald's artwork. So, getting back to Philip, Philip has a new book in the making, altogether in collaboration with his twin brother and other people. He has 12 books out there. So, without further ado, I think we'll try and bring Philip in, and Paul Sinclair. Welcome, Philip.
Hello, Paul. Hello, Les. Thank you very much for having me on your show. Really delighted. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Philip, and really looking forward to what you've got to share with us tonight. Don't know that we ever expected this YouTube channel to go quite like it's going, but we're delighted, and the people that are joining us in this chat room, it's brilliant, the interaction. But Les, have you got anything else to say?
Well, what I'm going to do tonight, guys, is a little bit different to what we've usually done, Paul. And I'm going to let you interact with Philip, and no doubt Philip will tell us all about his life story and where he's got to and where he is now in life with his writings and other things. So I'll leave it with you, Paul, and I'll disappear for a little bit. Okay, guys?
Thank you, Les. Hi, Paul.
Hello, Philip, and as I said, great to talk. We have met before at the Outer Limits conference run by Chris Evers, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Where you, I have no qualms in saying you gave the best talk of the day, and I was talking as well, and without doubt it was thoroughly riveting, and I think everybody there that day enjoyed it. And I think the people in this small audience, or this section of the chat that we've got today, are really going to be surprised at some of the things you've got to talk to us about, because we need to hear more of Philip Kinsella. And do you want to start, Philip, and just give us a little bit of a background about you and Ronnie, your twin brother, and how you became so immersed in this subject?
Yeah, I mean, when we were young, I mean, my twin brother and I used to spend holidays with our grandparents in Middlesex, Felton, Middlesex, and they had a very large house out there. And my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was psychic. And at the time, UFOs and psychic phenomena never really interested me. But there was an occasion where we'd been out in the back of their garden on, I think it was perhaps it was a wonderful sunny afternoon or evening, going into the evening or evening, and a clear blue sky, and there was a silver orb that came over. We thought at first it had been a balloon, but it turned out to be something quite different. And this object that was perfectly spherical, silver, no markings on it, it seemed heavy and quite weighty in nature, came over to the tree and then over her head. And we were totally aghast, my brother and myself. And when we asked her grandmother what it was, she said, well, the fairies have come to take a closer look at us. And of course, I don't know if that was her way of trying to calm the situation. But the eye, as Ronnie called it, went up to the windows of the house and then moved over the house. And we ran into the house to the other side to see it disappearing. So that was really the mark of true mystery that we were never able to solve. And I remembered hearing my grandmother on the phone at night talking to family members about it. And it was quite shocking when you're presented with something that is so out of the ordinary. Because in those days, back in the early 80s, I mean, you could buy in some books on UFOs, but to talk about them was taboo, the same as life after death. It just wasn't spoken about. However, the real interest within ufology really gripped me after an experience that I had in 1989, the winter of 1989. I'd been 20 years of age at the time, and that happened in a village. In a village called Marston Mortain, which is a few miles outside of Bedfordshire. And that event itself changed everything for me. That is why I then immersed myself into the abduction UFO phenomenon, trying to find out what it is that we're dealing with, and as well as the abduction phenomenon, trying to work out what that is.
Brilliant, Philip. And you said that you saw this object with your grandma.
Yes.
Would you think her take on it was different to yours due to her age, or do you think that likening it to fairies or the little folk were just something she did to pacify you?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Paul. That is a very good question, one I've never really been able to answer. But my brother did remind me that, you know, back in World War II, the Foo Fighters were very common. And my brother still maintains to this day that they are eyes, that they are some sort of seeking device that watches or looks or observes. So because it was silver in nature, perhaps we saw it in its natural form in daylight as opposed to glowing in the dark. We don't know. But I know that our grandmother pacified us most definitely, because she must have known something more about them. But was unwilling to talk about it. It was very bizarre. Well, everything to do with the UFO phenomenon was very bizarre. So that is something that we're still trying to work out to this day, and I think it will forever remain a mystery. But the major event, or the one main event in 1989, through what we call the alien abduction, as they call it, and of course, which I subsequently suffered for in the media machine back in the late 90s, that was something I wanted to explore and have continued, like yourself, Paul, in all the areas that you've been looking into, your fabulous work and your books and your research into the phenomena, to find out the truth of what we're dealing with, because I think that's what we're trying to nail. What is this?
Do you think, Philip, that because of experiences after that sighting, do you think it suppressed you a little bit? And although your work still went on, you and Ronnie were still working and doing these books and researching, did the media affect the way that you spoke about it afterwards for a while?
Yes, it did, most definitely. I mean, you know, as I said, in 1989, it was a little bit more open rather than going back into the very early 80s. But certainly, with regards to the media, the media's way of dealing with it, national television, and one such program that I will not name, you know, the way that it was orchestrated was like a circus, and I was so naive and believing that people would be able to understand you, and I had been very you know, gracious and very humbling, and you know, they asked me to go on this other program because they'd seen me on another one and thought that I was a good speaker, and of course I never wanted to be a speaker or anyone like that, but you know, they turned the tables on us, and I had been with Omar Fowler. Nick Pope had been there with the late Georgina Bruni, the brilliant late Georgina Bruni. Malcolm Robinson was there, and I literally found that they had sought me out. They knew what had happened to me in 1989, and they wanted to poke fun at it. So yeah. I came out of there feeling very dejected and isolated. So sure, my research took a step back because I was frightened And you know, because I didn't realize that that the media machine, their take on it was so negative. And I remember being, I mean, I do drive, but I was driven back by a chauffeur from the studios and feeling absolutely ashamed and embarrassed. So yeah, sure, I think a lot of the media, unfortunately, are ringleaders for a higher organization that is determined, sorry, to suppress any form of UFO reality, whatever form that reality presents itself as it being what it is, basically.
Well,
so yeah.
I think you're right, and I think we touched on it earlier, as in we are the debunker, the skeptics sort of dream scenario. I think that's what I said earlier, isn't it, when we spoke?
Yes.
Because the only place that this truth, and it is a truth, unless Philip, you're lying and I'm lying, and I know full well that I'm not, and I don't think you are, about the things that have happened and the countless thousands of other people. But the only place that this is real is in here. It's stamped in your mind, and I wouldn't think there'll be a day goes past without it doesn't pass through it, these scenarios, the event. But you can't prove it. And that's the difficulty. And no matter how much we sort of pulling other elements to narrow down those goalposts and make it as truthful as we can, it's all, we're always open to what you talked about, the ridicule factor, because there's no way of proving it. But obviously, I don't think nobody's going to ridicule you here, Philip. So if you want, I'd love to hear about the 89 sighting stroke encounter.
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, this, as I said before, this is what led me into the theoretical application of what we may be dealing with. I'm no scientist, but like you, I'm all for the truth. I've been searching for the truth. And the episode itself that I will now describe was something very bizarre, but I have been working with some other researchers that have been trying to put the pieces together. I'd literally come home from work. It was in the winter of 1989, and I had to walk the mile or so back from a rickety old railway station in Millbrook. And we lived in a cul-de-sac in a fairly large house. And my brother and I shared a very big, huge room. It was a study-stroke bedroom with a downstairs bathroom. So we wanted that as our like refuge, and it was downstairs in the hall. So on this particular night that I came back, I would have got through the door about 7:10 because I had to wait for the 6:37 train from Bedford to Millbrook, and of course the walk back. I'd get in the door probably around about 7:05, depending on how fast I walked. And when I got in the door, there was my brother and my sister and our dog. Yes, we had a dog then called Benji. And I'd gone through the glass, because where the front of the house was, it was frosted glass. So all of the panels, they were all frosted glass. You walked through a hall, and I went into the kitchen. You know, we were just having a chit chat. My sister was making a drink. My sister was to my left of where I was standing in front of the door that led out to the hall, so I could see straight out into the hall. And my brother was kind of like in front of the dining area, so he couldn't see the hall, but I could see him. He was facing me. And what I remembered most clearly is that the atmosphere started to change. When we were talking, it was as though everything became electrified. It was like static, like I don't have hairs on my back, but certainly on the neck, and the arms started to raise upwards, and the dog started to react by starting to growl, because he was in front of the breakfast bar looking out upon the hall where I could see into the hall, to the frosted glass windows, to the driveway. So as this strange energy started to increase, my brother did something very strange. He seemed to go into a trance. I'd never seen this before in anyone. And he raised his head up to the ceiling, and the words that came out of his mouth was, and I'll quote, "There's going to be an earthquake, or grandma's going to die." Now, there was no earthquake, and our maternal grandmother was still very much alive. Now, while he said that, he didn't move. It was as though, I don't know, he was restrained, or whatever force had a hold of him. I don't know. I can't prove there was any force holding him, but it was very bizarre. And then all of a sudden, the dog started to bark, and really bark, and there was a light that came up from the outside driveway towards the frosted glass doors to the house. And I thought that either my mother or someone had returned home from work early, or were coming up to visit, because I thought it was the headlights to a car. At this time, I didn't drive, you see. I didn't drive the car in my 20s. I was past it a little bit later. But So the light started to intensify to the point where I'm looking out to the hall, the dog is barking. It seemed as if everything was frozen. It's really weird. The light, the frosted glass doors started to move like jelly, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And I'm looking at this thinking, what the hell is that? I mean, what on earth? Your brain is trying to engage with reality, focusing on where you are, and then watching something that looks like it's from a cartoon. And then I see this very small figure, about 3 foot in height, all in black, completely black, very diminutive, with a large, what I thought was a motorcycle helmet on its head. Of course, it wasn't your conventional motorcycle helmet because it had no markings. It was just like a black mask. And it came through the door returned back to normal, and it shot into our downstairs bedroom study, which was straight ahead of it in the corner of the house downstairs. So I'm completely shocked. My brother comes out of his trance. I reach behind me to get the largest knife that I can find, and I shout, "There's an intruder in the house. There's an intruder in the house." And then all of a sudden, this thing, whatever it was, shot from the downstairs room across the hall, up the stairs, and disappeared. And I still to this day couldn't work out what it was, how it had gained entry into the house, what the hell had happened with the glass and the atmosphere. So we'd searched the house all over, and later on I broke down because I thought, well, this is ridiculous. You know, I don't understand what's happened. It seemed to defy the laws of physics, and I was very practical, very black and white. I hope I still am today. So in those days, you didn't have many people you could call. You didn't have internet or mobile phones or anything like that. So, you know, I thought, okay, I'll just leave it. And you know, but then something even stranger happened in the early hours of that morning. And this is something that really was very bizarre. I found myself, it was probably in the early hours of the morning, floating on my back with my head being pulled towards through the kitchen doors and through the conservatory doors. Let me explain. As I'm floating, I'm on my back. I'm about 3 foot off the floor, about the same height as what this being had been when it came in through the door. I was suspended. I could move my neck and my eyes, but I couldn't move anything else. So it felt like I was suspended. And people say to me, "Oh, well, you had, you know, you've had some dream, or you know, it's yeah, sleep paralysis." But let me explain that in that state, I was shocked because I knew that I was awake, I was conscious, and I was articulate with my thoughts. And as I was being pulled through the downstairs hall through to the kitchen, I went through the door. And one thing I'm thinking is, how the hell am I able to go through solid objects? I can't stop myself. I'm not filled with fear. I'm just curious about what's going on. Because when you're presented with a situation that is bizarre, people say, "Well, what did you think? Did you do this?" Well, there's no way around how you should think or feel at the time. You think and feel what's going on around you. So I'm being pulled on my back with my head forward through then to the kitchen door, through to the conservatory, and out to the back garden, which was quite large. And I was spun around, and when I was spun around, I could see all these UFOs in the sky. And the reality was like it hit me hard, thinking, "Oh my God, they're real. They're real. They're here. I can see them." And in this state of euphoria, I still can't move. I see one object, and it's a circular object, and it's remaining stationary up in the sky. And I see all the others moving, and as soon as I focus my attention on this one object that's not moving, I'm pulled up towards it at a great speed, and then I black out. And the next part of this was the most harrowing. So I will just state here, Paul, if that's okay, that yep. Some form of examination had been administered, and it was something that I had to deal with. This is the main emphasis of the experience, where people say they have love and light and encounters and experiences. Well, I don't dispute that, but I can't vouch for that because I haven't had the experience myself. Mine was very different. But needless to say, after what they did to me in there, When I came down from the craft, when I was forced to exit the craft with two other greys, as we call them, I wasn't allowed to look at them. The most strangest part was about to be unraveled to me, as if this isn't strange anyway. There was another craft hanging over the conservatory building, and underneath this was another grey, but quite different from the others. I call him Noddy, although he's not quite like the children's character Noddy that Enid Blyton created. But this guy frightened the hell out of me, because he stood there in a one-piece uniform. He had knee-length boots. He had a stupid pointed hat on his head. His face was like a grey, but a little bit more humanized, because the chin came to a more pronounced point at the end. And it was fairly muscular, and he had his arms folded in front of him and looking at me in a very threatening manner. So I'm thinking to myself, my God, I've seen this being in the house. I've been taking up, and they've done whatever they've done to me. And now you're standing there, whoever the hell you are, looking at me as though I am the bad person. What is it? What do you want from me? I don't understand. It just stood there looking at me, and I seem to recognize it from somewhere. I don't know, but when you see animated plastic moving, that frightens you, because I wanted to ask it a question. I also wanted to punch it, because I felt violated, humiliated, and degraded. And I thought, I know what I'm going to ask it. I know what I want to ask. I need to ask, because if he can answer it, then I can prove that this has happened to me. I said to him through mind, I don't feel that I could speak through my mouth. At least this is the only way I can explain it. How the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? How is that achieved? And do you know what, Paul? His face changed. It looked startled. His mouth went into an O, and he started to lift his head up underneath his craft, and he rasped this electronic mumble jumble that reminded me of the voice synthesizer that we both had for our ZX81. And I came crashing through the door, the conservatory door, the kitchen door, and through to the hall and into my body. And as soon as I came into my body, I woke up. I immediately had a nosebleed. I had to go and sort myself in the bathroom. And so after that experience, I had 3 triangular marks that were on the back of my right ear. I have 3 marks that are still there on my right arm. I suffered intense nosebleeds to the right nostril. And, so it was quite a difficult time. And we tried to take a picture of the triangular marks to the back of the right ear. We had one of those old Polaroid cameras that would develop the film instantly. It would not come out. It was that experience alone that kind of like confused me, because people were making out that their abductions were very physical experiences. And I'm thinking, well, part of it was physical and part of it wasn't. So this led me then into the quest, a lifelong quest to find out more about, the soul, what the greys are, what they may represent, what they're doing and why they're doing it, and also their brilliant engineering in being able to connect on a psychic level with us. They are masters with controlling the mind, but they're not very strong in physical form. So that then led me to investigate more and more about what we could be dealing with.
So when you say you came crashing back through the door, the conservatory doors, through the door,
yes,
that was just a feeling. Do you believe that your physical body was inside the property still?
Correct. And this is where the theoretical aspect of the research that I've been doing has led to several speculations that we have to take into account, because I think that most people tend to generalize that the UFOs are physical nuts and bolts craft. I'm not disputing that, but more times than not, you read within a lot of accounts of psychic integration, because the greys are very interested in reproduction, strangely, for a species that cannot reproduce. They're interested in all the aspects that make us what we are as humans. They appear to be a blank canvas. It's almost as if they're using us to fill in the spaces that they themselves have lost. So I believe that with regards to the out-of-body experience, and people will use that as though you're not in control of an out-of-body experience, but what we have to realize is that, the military had trained people to remote view, which means to extend their consciousness beyond the confines of the material world. So, so absolutely, Paul, there were 2 aspects. And this is what as a youngster, I was confused because I thought, well, don't abductions happen on a physical level? This didn't. And I was like, well, either I've got it wrong or maybe we're not being told the correct data.
You said there were two elements to this. So there was a physical part. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had the marks at the back of your ear, would you?
Correct.
Now, so did you see them during the physical, do you think?
Yes, I did. I believe that if you want me to go into the theoretical aspect, Paul, I can.
I'm just you just roll with this, Philip, because I'm intrigued. I hope the people listening with us are just as interested.
We're all important. I always say to everyone that we're all keys, and that the reality that connects with you is personal to yourself. Trying to understand the greys, as we call them, is very interesting because, like humans, there may be different factions of them. So there were two parts to this experience. One had been a physical, where I saw the man in black come through the door. The other part had been non-physical, but I had received marks during that connection with the examination, the very crude examination. What I believe happened there is that, in my understanding of the greys, is that they appear as prosaic in nature. One of the questions I wanted to ask through many years of research was, why were they interested in reproduction? Why are they interested in us as a species? What is their program? And why would a species create a new genus if they themselves cannot reproduce? Why are they using us? And of course, this then led me to a revelation that occurred in 1996, which I wrote an article for Alien Encounters magazine, which was quite big then, and it was called Spirits in a Material World. And I kind of like had this download. People laugh and they joke and they say, always had a download. But the only way I can explain it, it's the only one I had, was that there was a moment of revelation, as though an answer maybe had been given to me. And I remembered I was at work at the time when certain facets of this puzzle came together. So let's generalize with regards to the greys. As I said, like people, humans, there are different factions of humans who have their own agenda. The greys may be the same. I'm not saying that they're all evil here, and this is a dangerous grounds to walk on, because people will say, well, you're wrong about the greys because they're this. Well, I'm not going to dispute that. I'm open to any form of suggestion. But I met Dr. David Jacobs in Arizona a number of years ago, and we had a chat about this. And I know that he believes that the greys are creating a new species to populate the planet, to take over the Earth. Well, I respect the good doctor's theories. He's a brilliant man. But my theory led to the fact that, what if the greys were in fact dead? Let's take a look at ourselves as humans. For those who believe that we have a soul, which I do, and that when we die, that soul returns back to source. I'm not going to get involved with religious debate here because that's dangerous grounds, but let's just suppose that the soul comes into incarnation and then returns when the physical body is no longer needed. So it goes through perhaps varied levels of experiences in different bodies. So if I take you, Paul, as an example, you are a natural process of evolution. You've come through the birthing channel. I hope you have, and you're not an alien.
I think so.
You've come through the correct birthing channel. You carry the memories of past experiences, maybe from past lives, the other side, whatever. When you die, you are the original signature and copy of that soul. It returns back to the other side. Now, let's say that I cloned you in a laboratory. Let's say I cloned 100 of you in a laboratory, and those clones grew up. Now, when you die, you as the natural product, as the natural signature, will return back to source. Your clones will only have perhaps the memory of one single physical life. They'll only have one recording of one existence. And the question that is debatable is that when those clones die, they perhaps won't be able to have free passage back to where you came from. Now, let's just take our theory one step forward here. Let's go into the unbelievable. Let's assume that those clones of yours had died, and that spark of whatever it has amalgamated itself into a one hive mind consciousness of all those other copies that had been. And those copies are naturally curious about where they are, if they're stagnant or stuck. And those copies then find a species that reproduces. So we hear these stories of hybridization program, of female humans being incubators for these said hybrids that appear weakly, pathetic looking. And the mother is normally brought back onto the craft to, let's say, show by the Greys, they want the human to show this hybrid love, feeling, emotion, the things that the Greys do not have. Now, why is that? Is it possible through, whatever our understanding of the other side is like it's whimsical? Well, those people that have had near-death experiences say it's real world. The same with an abductee. To them at the time, as their consciousness is removed from this plane, it is a real plane of existence. So I think what the Greys are doing is that they may be extracting the true essence of what we are from us into their vibrational energy frequency. And that whatever they do to that energy signature of the soul will invariably, affect the physical body, because they're still attached on some level. So is it possible that the Greys are using us as their containers, as their incubators, to try to propel their spark of awareness back into a being that is so different from themselves, but also a part of human, and thus propel them back to where their masters came from, original copies came from? Now, I know, first of all, I'm saying this, in a nutshell, but on a theoretical level, the model that we've been working with is quite complex, because we have to also bring into the fore a lot of other aspects that could be a possibility. But why is it the Greys have no understanding of love, of taste, of smell, of aging? It appears as though they are a complete blank canvas, and they are fascinated with us.
So do we, if we play with this theory, this what you're working on, and I assume Ronnie's working on this with you.
Correct.
Does it jump into reincarnation then of ourselves? Is that what you're saying? And then perhaps the reason the Greys don't feel love, don't feel emotion, don't express emotion, is because they are this, essentially just this one life, this one being, and they haven't experienced lots of other lives. Is that what you're coming at with this?
Correct. And Ronald had an experience much younger than when I had mine, and we've both, I'm not saying that we're special. In my books, we are all unique. We're all special. We all are connected. But, I had to live with that abduction for many years in shame, and and it's people like your good selves that have given me the strength and the courage to come forward, to be able to, build that confidence that I had lost. After the abduction in 1989, I was absolutely determined to find out whether or not that I was lying or the system was lying. Now, the system tells us that UFOs don't exist, okay? And this leads up to many other experiments that we had done, and of course, the subsequent sighting of the crafts on the 9th of April 2016. So either I was lying, or the system that we serve was lying. So I wanted to find out, well, am I really that delusional to make myself believe that I had been abducted by aliens? And the system that we serve, when you start to dig deeper into it, you find it's a little bit ugly. And I always laugh and joke, Paul, when we say that the term conspiracy theorist has been utilized as a weapon against the inquiring mind. So if anyone says, oh, don't listen to him, he's a conspiracy theorist, well, that's just deflecting the whole idea completely. So I wanted to find out, well, am I lying? Is my brother lying? Are the witnesses lying, or is the system lying? And the way I'm seeing this is that there is a systematic program by the system that pretends that it cares and, cares for us, sorry. It is anything but, because now we're finding that there is a systematic program to silence and debunk researchers like yourself. You're probably being watched and monitored to make sure that the herd don't bolt outside of the pen. But going back into your question, Paul, with regards to life after death, yes, it's weird, isn't it? How on our unique journeys. And, you know, it doesn't matter who you are. I respect all peoples in life, you know, but how experiences change you. And the way that the system has molded our consciousness into believing what it wants us to believe as truth, we begin to find out that when we do our own lines of investigations, that nearly all of it doesn't add up. So that is very disturbing, and I think that perhaps the system is scared because the system, I call it the system, the governing body of those nameless, faceless bureaucrats who control from the behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz. You never see them. You know, maybe they're frightened because this phenomena is highly complex, and we've been sold the story that they're coming from another planet. I don't doubt that. But they've given us quite a simple terminology, like little green men coming in their flying saucers and landing. I think it's far more complicated than that. And I think that a lot of good people, honest people, because like you, Paul, and Les, and many others that we connected with within our superb group of minds, we only deal with truth, with honesty, with empathy. But it does lead us to think outside the box.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I will tell you that the brilliant Kathleen Marden has suggested that. I prefer to keep my memories as they are, but there is another aspect to that, another memory that was a reoccurring dream that I kept having. I'm not saying that that has anything to do with the abduction phenomena, because that has been released. But yes, I have thought about that, and it's something I have toyed around. But you see, I'm one of these people that some people find it hard to hypnotize.
Can I
have
just
someone.
butt in 1 second? The chat are saying that they can't hear you, Les, and I think
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'll ask the question again, just for those that my microphone was on mute. Yeah, so I'll just ask the question again so everybody can hear that. Philip, has Philip ever considered quantum healing hypnosis therapy? I think we've got to where we. If you want to start again, you can do, Philip.
Yeah, Kathleen.
Sorry about that.
Kathleen Marden, as you all know, she's the niece of Betty Barney Hill. She's an amazing lady, and she has suggested it. But I would rather just wait for the memories to surface. I'm working with someone else, not as a hypnotherapist or a regressionist, to see about a memory, a recurring memory that I have. We don't know whether or not that's connected, but I feel on a personal level it is through my childhood, within my childhood. But I had one chap try and hypnotize me. And to be honest with you, like Paul and many others, we don't suffer fools blindly. We basically, I just felt like this wasn't happening, that I couldn't trust what I was bringing through in terms of the session, because to me it felt like it was coming from another part of me that I didn't think was real. So I try to stay only with the facts where I can. And it's very dangerous, because when you start dealing with parts of the mind, you don't want to, excuse my French, screw things up for that person, you know? So, but yes, I have considered that at some point later, perhaps.
If that went wrong, Philip, you would tarnish the truth of your story. So you've got to feel right about it right from the beginning, haven't you?
Yes, I mean, it's enough already with dealing with the so-called abduction. I mean, you know, trying to understand that. But I feel that, you know, our research is taking us into deeper areas that may be uncomfortable. Paul, you know, through your research, amazing research and your books. And that's what drew me to you, because you think outside the box, you think outside the box. And I think that's what we have to do, because we're forever going around in circles with regards to trying to establish what we are dealing with. And I think that there is a soul construct, a conscious construct, a psychic construct that is very important that we have to bring into the equation. It's not just one thing. I believe that they are all connected.
Can I just come in? Yeah, can we just come in with another question? Welcome, Colin Keelsey, in the chat tonight. Colin was our guest on last week, and we had a great show with Colin last week. And he's asking a question, simple question, and it's for you, Philip. Can we see the mark on your arm? I don't know if the stream will do justice to the mark.
Don't know if the camera will bring this up, because it is. I'm in a bit of dim lighting, but I can try and find it for you. I've got my glasses on. Just bear with me.
Yes.
I don't think I'll be able to show it on here because they are 3. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Let me just find it. Here they are. I don't think you'll be able to see it because they're
we
so
can't see it, Philip.
They are there.
Oh, don't dispute it. It's good question, Colin, but if Philip's webcam's anything like mine, you're not going to see it.
Right. Another question has come in from Lisa Odd, and it's for you, Philip, again. Philip, are there only a finite number of souls?
That is a very good question. I can't answer that. We're still exploring that question of like finite number of souls. As we understand it, as I understand it, you are individual, you are unique, you're a part of something that comes from something much bigger. Maybe we're all part of the same thing. That is something that is, I think our understanding of that goes beyond our current level of the way we see things, because we're still arguing about, how the universe was created and what part that God was part of. So I think that the God force or the God consciousness is we're all connected to it. So I can't answer that question. It's a very good question. I can't answer that, but I do believe that we go through. It makes sense to, if we're reincarnating, if you buy a car, you're going to get when you first start driving, you're going to buy a little bit of a banged up model, aren't you? You're not going to get a Rolls Royce just in case you end up smashing that. So I think it's possible that there's more to our existence than just, a flesh and blood creature with a sell-by date that has a meaningless experience and then dies. I don't buy that. And in terms of Colin, I could have drawn them on, but I'm not that bad. The marks on my arm, but they are there. But you
got another one, Les?
Yeah, we've got another one from Jane Bowery.
Yeah.
Welcome, Jane. Yes, Philip, how do you know you underwent an examination?
Oh, I know, and I'll tell you how I know, because when you find yourself in a situation where you are restrained, where you are naked, and when a procedure is being performed on you, and the terror of that, of being taken outside your normal environment that you consider as safe. Whitley Strieber, I do recall, when he wrote his book, his best-selling, brilliant book, Communion, he had a hard time. I saw him being interviewed on Wogan, and I loved the man. I really felt for him because the audience couldn't understand. But I kind of felt sorry for him because, what he went through, he was trying to organize into a constructive pattern of understanding. So when you're telling people that you've had an examination and that you've had an abduction, people roll their eyes up. But let me tell you, when you are in that situation, I wouldn't want that to happen to even my worst enemy. Not that I really have a worst enemy, but I wouldn't want that to happen to them. It was cold. It was totally without empathy. I didn't understand it. I had no idea what they were doing. I knew what they were doing, but I didn't know the reason behind it. And that was something that I had to live with and deal with on a very difficult level of understanding. But I was more interested in the process itself. So most people say, oh, why don't you keep talking about your abduction? Well, it's almost as if you have to prove something before you come out with a theory. I am very much a person who goes in for the kill. I want to find out what this is and why it happened. And if I just reiterate here on your very good point, thank you, is the fact that when this happened when I was 20, I'm 51 now, and I can still recall it as though it happened yesterday. That is how clear it is in my mind, and that is, you know, so that's something we have to deal with on a personal level. And that's not just seeing the UFOs that were caught on a camera and analyzed, thank God. So it proves that there is some interaction on some level. So if people say you're a liar, that's fine. You go ahead and feel that. This is my experience. This is what I'm looking at.
Sorry.
I'll start again. No mic. Sorry, guys. Right then. A good question here is coming from Richard Van. I'll get it right. And Richard asks, Philip, does abduction run through your lineage? Run through your family, in other words?
Well, I can't claim anything, but I do feel that is true. And I think that my grandmother, for instance, was psychic. You know, when you say you claim something, I don't like claiming anything, because there has to be proof in who you are and what you are. I have no way of proving who and what I am. But I believe that, yes, because my grandmother was psychic, and when she had seen the silver orb, when it presented itself to us, let me tell you, it was as though it was just like a walk in the park. But for us both, you know, for my brother and myself, it was the most amazing thing. When you're a kid and you see something like this, I don't know what it is. It's like, wow. It's like, what is that? It was weighty. It looked heavy. Excuse me. My brother called it the eye. I don't know why he called it the eye, because there was no marking on it. So, and also that my uncle Bob, my cousin Kath, her father, who's passed over now, he told my twin brother and I that he was the most skeptical person on this planet. If it wasn't black and white, it didn't exist. And they lived in Caister, by the sea, and he had seen a huge cigar-shaped craft coming out of the ocean, and all these light balls, he was calling them, going into it. And he ran home, and his wife, my Auntie Betty, had to call a doctor because they thought he was going to have a heart attack. And he told that story to me and my brother when we were younger, and after the experience that we had with our grandmother, and also my cousin's husband, who her father was Bob. He'd seen one of these orbs coming over his fence, because they lived in Caister also for a while, and he saw one coming over the fence when he was working, because he's a manager of an oil rig. And he saw one of these coming over when he was offshore and having some time off. He'd work out in the yard for early hours of the morning, which he'd love to do. And there was one presented itself right in front of him, and he locked himself in the toilet and wouldn't come out. So I think there's something there, I think.
Philip, the silver orb that you saw with your brother and your gran,
yes.
Did it displace the reality, like what happened in the house later? Did you feel the hairs on your neck and no?
No, we're very bizarre. But the latest one, 9th of April 2016, that is something very different. That was the one that was filmed and analysed and all the rest of it.
Probably get to that in a moment. I don't know whether Les has got another question of you.
Yeah,
Les, is your mic on, Les?
I think the mic's on this time. Yes. Yes. Okay, Paul. Thank you. A question for you, Paul. Actually. And it goes back to what we asked Philip earlier. Do you remember, Paul, being experimented on? Do you have any memories of that?
I spoke. We spoke about this earlier. I've got no string of events from start to finish. The displacement, the altered reality is very, very familiar to me. It's not at the time. It's like almost like when Philip said you can't explain it to somebody. You can't be ready for it when it happens. It's only when it's over that you realise it's happened, because you're that absorbed in the moment. But to jump back to your question, Les, mine are cameos of events, and I think we touched on it briefly earlier. And let's just say there's 10 pieces of the jigsaw. And each scenario, some I've got 3 pieces, some I've got 4 or 5, but the pieces I've got are clear and horrific. And just like you, I've got no memories of any, or I might have one or 2 at the most, of something nice, a almost angelic experience. But the experiences I've got, these cameos of events, were sheer terror. absolute terror, and they were happening to a child. I mean, I'm looking back now. It stopped happening to me in 1997. Obviously, I weren't a child then, but in 1966 or 66, 67, it's a little boy. I didn't even know that these experiences that were happening to me in the night weren't normal. How crazy does that sound? Because, and we'll not go into abuse, but somebody that age doesn't know that something is not right, and what was happening, I didn't know was not. I didn't know. We had a realization, and I think it was. I can't remember exact year. I'd love to say, but if I get date wrong, somebody will jump on you. But, well, somebody can tell me anyway. It was when Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen, the song. And when I saw them singing in that silhouette, and anybody our age will remember the song, I it didn't click. I didn't go, oh, I know what's happening now, but I realised what they were. And these beings that were, as I perceived, eyes in the curtains, coming out of the curtains. These weren't childhood imaginations, but the most difficult part is the isolation for me anyway, or was for me, not now, but the isolation, the vulnerability on many levels, not being able to talk about it to anybody. I'm on about as you start to get older, because of the eye rolling and the ridicule factor. We'll get it now. There'll be people thinking, what a load of rubbish. I can't help that any more than you can, Philip. And I've gone off on one. I've got vivid memories of what happened, but no sequence of events like Philip appears to have with this 1989 abduction.
Can I just ask a question for you then, Philip? A question coming from Steve-O. And he's asking, with you being an identical twin, does that mean, is there any direction there to being an experiencer, more of an experiencer than anybody else?
No, I don't believe that. I believe that there are many people on the planet. Just because we're twins doesn't make us special. I mean, most people will say that, we were picked on at school because we were different. We used to be in the weeds gang, used to hang out with all the squares, It's like I was always the square. I was always asking questions. But my brother had an experience back in when he was 13, and that was with the doctors. That was in a different place. And his experience was very different from mine. So my understanding is, why would he have a kind of, it was very frightening for him at the time. It scared him, but his was not as demeaning as mine. Now, I remembered, and this is where we have to be very careful, because people can claim all sorts of things. And I am, God forbid, I am not one of those people. As I said before, I'm not interested in the experience anymore. I'm more interested in the answers, although maybe you had to have it, like Paul has, for him to have, been a conduit for Bempton and all of the research that he's been doing, and trying to formulate the conclusions, because Paul is just after the truth, the same as I am and many other researchers, or, true researchers.
Sorry, yeah.
No.
Carry on, Philip, yeah.
We're very in tune with one another. We're very artistic. We like the same films, the same books, the same music. We like the same clothes. We even used to have a secret language. Yes, we used to have a secret language when we were younger, of more than 100 sounds that we could identify with whom we were dealing with, because like all of you, when you're kids, you've got to be toughen up, don't you? Because we came from a very poor background. People say, oh, you're rich, but it's the way that we were brought up. It's a different story, because we used to live on the property of a mansion when we were younger, a Bignell house in Bicester, and we went to a school because we had no money, and we were taught to speak proper. And people say, oh, you're posh, but we're very down to earth, trust me. But no, I think that anyone can be a target. Anyone is a connection with these things. So no, I don't believe that.
Another question is coming from Mickey Pierce. And Mickey Pierce asks, has Philip seen any other beings other than the Grey Men? No.
What's interesting is that there were, but I did not talk about that through the experience that I had on board what we call the craft, when I had the grueling operation, or the procedure as I call it. I will say there were two non-reptilian type. They didn't interact with me. They were horrific, and there had been a grey on there, and there were two that took me out. There was one that was waiting for me, the noddy character, afterwards. But yes, that's the only. I saw another reptilian. Dare I use that word? And this is something else. I didn't want to tell people, oh, I've seen a grey alien and I've seen 3 reptilians. I mean, my God, they'd send me to the lunatic asylum. But now that a lot of this has come out, and I have mentioned this many, many years ago, but I kept it kind of like low key because I didn't realize that I was going to end up researching it and write books on it. That's the last thing I wanted to do. But I also wanted to set the record straight because a lot of people were coming up with things that weren't true. And I thought, well, look, come on, let's be honest about this. Let's be black and white with this. But the reptilians and the greys are the only ones I've seen. I know people have different experiences with different beings, but I can only talk for those that I've seen. I'm interested in the other, like I'm fascinated with Paul's research, the werewolves. I mean, that excuse me, that scares the crap out of me. But it's a part of the conundrum, the puzzle that we're looking at. They are real. They exist. So, yeah.
I saw a question earlier, Jane once again, and she said, where or how do you think the Men in Black fit in this? Or the small black being that passed through the door?
Well, that is a good point. And that's something, I've read stories. I know, Paul, that, I know that in the book, the new book that you and Bob contributed towards, which I'm very grateful to you. You wrote the foreword to it, Paul. I'm so grateful to you, for you, the public deceived. But Bob described an experience that he had with the Men in Black. Now that I don't think they're human. Thank you. You have to bring it back.
Little plug.
Yeah. Are they human or not? Well, I don't think that they are, and I think that they present themselves as a conduit to the actual main experience, to the consciousness, or dare I say it, the consciousness behind it. It's all very bizarre. It's all warped, and what Paul's doing is trying to put the pieces together. So I don't know.
They don't fit, Philip. They don't fit. The Men in Black don't. They're there. They're as obscure as everything else, but they don't fit. They don't conform, do they, to anything?
No.
Just like so do you think that the Men in Black then are a creation of the alien, or are the alien? I'm reluctant to call them alien even. I don't know what they are, but
Well, Paul, just as much. You probably know more than I do because you deal with a lot more witnesses. But I will tell you, I think that when someone has what we call a UFO or paranormal experience, let's say the UFO experience, it seems to open up a portal of other, dimensional creatures or beings that maybe seep through the opening that's been created by the beings. Now, are they a product of the Greys? I don't know. But my question is perhaps that they realize that they're screwing around with the person's mind so much that they want to really cover their tracks, because my brother even pointed this out, and something that I didn't think about. Why is it that more times than not, when someone is abducted, the aliens, as we call them, quote unquote, can't fully knock them out? It's almost as if they need them to be consciously aware through the procedure to connect from mind to mind, which is one of their strongest points. So the Men in Black may be a way of deterring the individual to stop them, but I think in most cases that would only convince the witness or the experiencer to take it further. So I don't know. It's very bizarre, isn't it? It's weird.
That's
no questions, Les?
Yeah, very true. That Philip, Paul, and Philip. I think we've come to a point in the live stream where we're going to introduce some amazing artwork done by your twin identical brother, Ronald. And we've put a little piece together, and hopefully everybody's going to enjoy this little piece. And we've got to give a shout out to Paul's daughter, Jessica, who's a singer-songwriter. And she has provided aptly some great piece of music to go with this sequence. Philip and Paul, we're going to run the video. I think we're about 1.5 minutes on the video, and then we'll come back to you guys. Okay.
No.
Done it again. So that was a fantastic. We've done it again. Yeah, we've had the mic on mute, but that was a fantastic piece of video there, which we put together with Ronald's artwork. And if anybody wants to see that, they'll be able to watch it on the live stream replay, or with Paul and Jessica's permission, we might be able to put that out separately. But yeah, that was great. Okay then, guys.
Okay, that's great, Les. Yeah. Well, I know we want to talk about your 2016 sighting, Philip. But just before we touch on that, I can hear Les's voice. I don't know where I'm getting that from. One sec, guys. That's that. Right, sorry about that. Before we touch on that, just jumping back to what you talked about previous, and I was intrigued when you said you saw the glass door flexing and moving, or the glass panel.
Yes.
My personal take on it is perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps it's. Do you think that they put their reality, like a bubble of their own reality, into our sphere of existence, sort of appear and expand out? Do you know what? Almost like a bubble of air under the ocean.
Yes.
And you'd be looking at things differently. And could the feeling that you had, the weirdness, the silence, similar to the silence you didn't hear the show last week where we talked about a fisherman that suddenly they thought that they were in some altered reality.
Yes.
Could that be? Do you think that we know they're creating it, Philip, but do you think that they're actually creating their own reality in ours, or do you think you've been transported and something's affecting your mind?
Yeah, I believe that they are connecting their reality through to our reality, so they are overpowering it, and that was proven to me, I think, just recently in 2016. That put a piece to the puzzle together, where they are able to distort time and space, where they are able to distort, reality as we know it. And I really believe that. When I go back to that point when I saw the doors and the light, no matter how many times I see that, I try to say to myself, it didn't happen. It couldn't have happened. It's impossible. But now, at age 51, and seeing and experiencing what we have tells me, well, that is possible. So I do believe you're right. You're absolutely correct. They deliberately, because you get some cases where you get 3 people and only 2 will see the UFO and the other person won't. So why is that? Because the consciousness or the energy or the intelligence behind that is making sure that one person won't see them and the other 2 will. There are several variables that I think can be identified when this kind of thing happens. You are absolutely correct, Paul. The feeling of the hair raising upwards back in 1989, of the dog reacting to the strange atmosphere, change in the atmosphere, my brother going into the trance. Now, I was speaking to another researcher, Pierre Sabac, another brilliant researcher who's trying to put the pieces together, because what Noddy had been doing when we had concluded our talk, such as it was, when he lifted his head up and started to speak, he was mimicking what my brother had been doing. So we're looking at this on a deeper level of reality, that these entities, these beings, whatever they are very clever. They're masters of deception as well. They can distort reality so that you would believe that it was just a dream or it was something else. So I agree with you there, totally, Paul. Yeah.
Do you think when Ronnie threw his head back, do you think that was a distraction on their part to distract you away and focus on Ronnie?
To be honest with you, it's possible, but it was bizarre. I mean, who would come out with there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die? I mean, it's random. It's ridiculous. There was no earthquake and our grandmother was still alive. So I think what had happened was that the force or intelligence that was behind that had scrambled his mind, was trying to scramble the environment or the situation and to knock everyone out. And I'm not saying that I'm special. We're all special. But for me, and yes, the dog, I have been, taking the mickey out because the dog, but animals are very receptive. And when that dog was barking and growling and I just saw it, well, That just tells you everything, doesn't it?
And just before we jump to 2016, the sphere that you saw with your gran,
Yes.
and you touched on speaking about your sister as well. What
Yes.
her reaction to this?
Well, she realised something had happened because she didn't see the creature coming through the door. That's the 1989 one, because she was standing to my far left, conveniently. My brother was standing in front of me, but slightly away. He was in the dining room, so he was near where the door, but he couldn't see through it. So I'm like, well, that's great, isn't it? Me and the dog were the only witnesses to that experience. But as I said, I then had problems with my right ear for many years afterwards, and I'd had that checked out on 3 occasions. The first time the doctor didn't know what to make of it and left it at that. And the second time just had a little look in. And the third time, I think this will make your listeners, your good watchers, your followers laugh, was that I booked to go and see the doctor for this problem because I felt something moving in my right ear. Remember, it was the triangular marks, the 3 on the back of the right ear, and then the 3 marks that aren't in a triangle but in a straight line. They're like burn marks on my right arm in the middle here. And of course, the nosebleeds to the right nose. So I go to the doctor because I want them to have a good look in my ear. So I made the appointment, I went in, and the doctor has a look with the equipment, and she's looking and she's looking and she's looking. And I'm like, well, what is she looking at? She said, can you hold on here for a minute while I go and get another doctor? And of course, my stomach dropped because I thought, oh, they could have found something nasty, like, a disease or an illness or something. And I'm thinking, why, goodness me. So the other doctor came down. I've got it in my head, like, I think and feel I may have an idea what it is. So the other doctor came down and she had a good poke in there. And she said, it still looks like it's healing. And she said, it has a crystalline structure. Well, that's all that she said. And then she left, very strangely. There's no conspiracy here. And the other doctor, who knows that I'm very much into the psychic elements, she doesn't know I'm into. She said to me, have you been abducted by aliens? Well, I went back to my car, far worse than I went to the doctors. Now, What's bizarre was it's almost as if they checked it out, it's weird, but they didn't do anything with it. Like, oh, go to the hospital, have that checked. Crystalline structure, still healing, what is it? So I left it, and I have left it since. So that is something that I found quite amusing, that the doctor would say that to me. It's
have you requested your medical notes?
No, I haven't, not yet. I had a small stroke, I think about 11 years ago. But, I'm a tough bloke, like my granddad, my mum's dad's tough old boy. Keep going. But I will have to do that at some point.
It might make interesting reading because I got mine a few years ago. And obviously, there's no conspiracy what the doctors are discussing and things. I don't tell them what had been happening to me. But it's interesting watching the letters pass from one doctor to a consultant and from a consultant. When these people are saying, does this man have a history of trauma? And I'd like you to look at this man's skin lesions and the punch hole lesions that have been appearing on this man's body intermittently between 1994 and 1987. And they're asking if I've got a history of trauma, and they're testing me for lots of things. And like the parting letters saying, we will have to draw us blank with Mr. Sinclair's lesions. Do you know what I mean? And
yes.
But there's words like, we're quite perplexed. The doctors at the surgery, all things, they don't prove what you're talking about, Philip, or what I'm talking about. I mean, we've said it before, and maybe we shouldn't say it. We could be just convincing liars. But you constantly feel that you've got to do this proving to people, because it's just so. It's so out there, isn't it? What we're saying's happens just so out there. But I'd like to bet there's a lot of people, not just the people in this chat, but a lot of people who've all had some, let's call it a cameo of an experience that they can't put their finger on. And what they've done, they'll shelve it in some dark place in their mind. And they will revisit it from time to time. I think that there's going to be far, far more people. We're not talking about the program tipping point, but there'll be a tipping point where people will start to talk about these things more. It's almost, we're not talking about the cryptids, but it's almost like the cryptids. I've said many times, I never thought I would look into such a thing. But
Yes.
we're getting the reports of these things from independent witnesses, some of them miles apart. So unless they're all making it up, there's got to be some reality to this. But back to you, Philip, and I'm interested to hear about your 2016 experience, unless Les has got any questions.
Right, I think we've got, let's have a look. Anomaly Research UK asks Philip, the voice you heard during your abduction, Philip, is it your own voice or is it in a different voice?
You mean the telepathic exchange?
Yes.
I
think that's what he's talking about, yeah.
My voice. It felt like I was talking, but I wasn't. It's when I was screaming when I had been restrained, I felt that was, I was screaming because I wanted to get out. I didn't understand what was going on. But I felt that it was some type of, it's weird when you speak to people, because I've done research on near-death experience, I had to, because I wanted to try and draw parallels between the abduction phenomenon and the near-death experience, which one is positive, one is negative, which kind of like may highlight an area of what the greys represent. I'm more interested in the theoretical dynamics rather than the experience now. But going back, it felt like I was talking, but it was through the mind. That much I do know, because I'm like, well, when I saw Noddy, I'm sorry, I call him Noddy, the guy with the pointed hat, and I think he was in one of those illustrations. Ronnie rendered a drawing of him. I had done one for one of the channels that I showed, but mine was a crude example. It felt like telepathic, although it feels like you're talking, but the exchange is very strange. Trying to, pin that down is very weird. It's almost like a natural process, as though you know how to do it when you're in that reality, when you've been brought into their state of reality.
Wow, that's right. Lisa Odd, she's saying, don't mention the reptiles. What colour were the reptiles?
They were a dark. I'm colorblind. My brother is colorblind as well, and he uses a wheel. But I know my basic colours. May I just say that they were a dark, maybe I'm get confused with brown or green, so I'd never make a good police officer. Yeah. It was like a they were a dark browny colour, or maybe a dark green. I think maybe that colour or that connection. They were very dark, and they had been moving backwards and forwards in a strange gait. They were covered in a mist. But let me tell you about them. There was no empathy. I was like a rablat. When you try to explain that to someone, and the hurtful thing is people laugh, or they did, or and then you have to live with that, and that hurts, because one, it makes you feel like you're a liar, and two, it makes you feel like you're absolutely ridiculous. And I work in a department store. I work training staff now, but I had someone coming up to me many years ago when I was on the floor and poking fun at me, saying, "Oh, you're the one that had the UFO experience." And these people don't stop and think that it hurts. You have to live with that. But they were a dark color. They were very. I tried to explain it, but they were just, there's no empathy. They're cold. If that's what's running our world, then God help us. Joke to my brother.
How big were these things compared to the others?
I was lying down. Oh, I'm tall. I'm 6 foot. I'm a tall guy. My brother and I are both 6 foot.
You're like me then.
Yeah, they could have been about that tall. They may have been taller. I don't know, because where I had been laying, and when I could move my head to my right, they were not far away from me. So they were tall. Yeah.
And muscular. Were these things muscular?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Any more, Les?
I think that's all I've got up to. I think I've got to go right back to an unrelated question, really, but we'll ask it, because Chris O'Neill asks, "Hi, Philip. Have you heard about the MAG UFO alleged crash recently, and wondered what was your view on it?" Do you understand that question?
Is that
MAG
the one that
UFO alleged crash? I haven't. It's been new to me. So.
I've seen an image of it, and someone was joking, saying it looked like a dog's bowl in the ground. But I don't know. I have had a look at it, but I haven't looked into it, as it were. The one that I was interested in, I was in touch with Tony Dodd briefly when I was doing my research, and he was involved in a UFO that had crashed in somewhere in Africa. And I remembered I've got his letter somewhere of him, because I was very fascinated with UFO crashes. No, I haven't really had a look at that. And we have to be cautious. And someone said to me, well, why do UFOs crash in areas that are not hugely populated? Well, have we ever considered that perhaps the establishments deliberately are able to bring them down? We don't know, and they will bring them down into a remote area when the opportunity arises. So, but no, I'll have to have a look into that.
And have we ever considered that we have actually got no idea what these things find of interest? So we're thinking, oh, it's a remote area. Why would they go there? But how can we think like they think? It's like the mind speak. You can't explain it that when they're speaking to your mind, and you're able to communicate back. I mean, I've not got really any experience of the beings or whatever you want to call them speaking into my mind. I've got experience of myself screaming, though. You said you could hear yourself. I couldn't, but I can hear myself inside screaming as a little boy, not being able to make a sound. But getting back to it, I mean, we don't actually know, Philip, what these things want from us. And I don't. And this isn't me being condescending to anybody. I don't know myself, but we, as humans, we're thinking that they want the same things we do, and it's probably the farthest thing away, because everything that they are is alien to us. Pardon the pun. But I don't know. It's
well, you know, it's important, because I think everyone's line of investigation leads them to where they need to go. I think, Paul, you're right. You know, we tend to try to stick everything in the same box. It just won't fit. And I think by looking at these phenomena and the knock-on effects it has on the individual, because someone who reports an experience with a UFO, or as we call them, aliens, normally results in a lot of paranormal activity that seems to open up around them, or within the immediate area of where it's happened. And also we have to take into consideration the fact that, we consider that we live one life and that's it. And really, it's a very small life, very tiny compared to the age of the universe and what's beyond that. So I think maybe it happens because it's designed to wake us up, or to move us into a new area of conscious expansion, because the system that we serve, as I said before, is trying its hardest to bog us down. I belong to NUFORS, which is the National UFO Reporting Service here in England, that was created by Nigel Ross, and that we're trying very hard to get the powers that be to understand us. Now, that's not going to happen, because we wrote a letter to Parliament. I won't say who, someone high up, begging and asking, please reach out to us. We've got a brilliant team. We're all involved. We can name them. You're one of them. To help us, to work together. Nothing came back. So it's kind of like, okay, so we know where we stand. So this silencing is very disturbing. And it tells us categorically that they have something to hide. Definitely.
Go on, Les, sorry.
Yeah, Lisa asks, on a personal note, do you think you're suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome, Philip?
Well, I think I've been suffering that the day I was born. No, it's a joke. You've got to have a sense of humor. It's interesting. Maybe through the experience, there is some level of shock, of course. I mean, if you put yourself in anyone's position where they have had an experience that they can't explain, and they're reaching out to people who are pushing you aside or brushing you off as a nutcase, that will have, it's no different from someone who's being abused, physically abused by someone. They need counseling, they need help, or someone that has a problem. You can't leave that person to just be on their own, because they need people. So I do believe that there was some shock involved, but I'm a strong person. I got past that negativity from other people and ridicule. I did go through a passage of anger, because I was hateful of the world, because it was so negative and it was so demeaning. And it's like, now get back into your job and get back to work and don't ask any questions, be a good person, toil the soul, pay your taxes and die. I'm like, no, I may be a rebel, But when the system tells you, well, UFOs don't exist, there were multiple other sightings we had going into the past that have been reported. I have the newspaper cuttings all stored away. I haven't released those yet in any of my books because I'm more focused on the main areas of what happened. So we've seen UFOs, my twin brother and I, at close range, and with some witnesses as well. So I know that I'm not lying. But certainly with regards to the stress factor, yes, I think perhaps I would have had some form of post-traumatic stress disorder associated with that because it was so out of the ordinary and unexpected. And when you are, dare I say the word, almost being raped, as it were.
Violated. Yep.
Yes, violated. That is something that, I can't explain. I can't.
You see, the thing with that, Philip, I mean, I'm not trying to label it as, oh, it's the ultimate, it's the worst, but it's not recognised. At least other forms of abuse are recognised. This isn't. The only place it exists is in your head.
Well, yeah, and well, at least we now know that there are many other people who are brave enough to come forward. And
thousands.
I have to say,
Millions.
Whitley Strieber was the one person. And I will say that he was the one man who, wasn't ashamed to come forward, and I really respected him. I saw him, as I said before, going back, and I could see what he was trying to do. He was trying to convince the people that he was telling the truth, and I believed he was telling the truth because I knew and could tell straight away what a good man he was. But then I knew about the media, you see, and I thought, well, this is how the media circus deals with people like this, so it can't help him. So sure, I mean, someone's going to suffer, aren't they? At some point, they're going to suffer in silence. And I think over time, you kind of like heal with that. I think you meet people, you talk to people, they help you in understanding that you are not crazy, that you are sane, that you are rational, that you are trying to put the pieces together in a puzzle that the system cares nothing for, or so we assume it cares nothing for. I think there's a lot more to be said with regards to them and those that govern behind the curtain, as it were, us herd, which is absolutely disgusting, calling us as the herd. I mean, who are they?
But do you not think, Philip, I mean, I don't know whether I'm right or wrong here, but the powers that be, the people in government, they probably aren't the ones that are not listening to your voice, to my voice, to anybody who says this is real, even though we know that there's military organizations or military forces all over the world now that have come out and said these things are real. But they're being steered by powers above them, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of inclined to be thinking anyway, Any more questions, Les? Sorry,
the faceless bureaucrats, the ones behind the curtain that are never seen. Their servants will obey their masters. But as I said, we can't. The problem is trying to work it out, and that's what our job is. Nearly all of the time, I'm always buying books. I've got all of Paul's books, his truth-proof books, and I'll tell you, Paul, I remembered I'd heard about you through someone else, and I thought, well, I'll get the book and read it. And I thought, my goodness, this man, he knows what he's talking about. Black and white, spade to spade. Okay, we have to be open and rational. But, that's why I thought, well, I loved your work. My brother loved you. You love you and your family very much, and Bob and all the rest that is connected with you, because you're honest, you're truthful, and you'll say yes or no. And I like that. I like someone who's black and white as well.
Well, thank you. Very kind of you. Les, have you more questions?
I think we've got one from Richard Van, and he asks, Philip, in your view, is there a link between disabled people, abductions, or psychic abilities? So I think there's a few things mixed in there into that question. I think disabled people, psychic abilities. I don't know where he's going with that question.
I think as a human form that we represent, we take in this life, the model of what we represent, consciousness. We're an entity that carries a soul, conscious awareness. It doesn't matter what vehicle that we have, that vehicle will find a way to adapt to its situation, whatever situation that is, whether or not there is some illness or something else, the vehicle will adapt. And most people will adapt more on a psychic level if they're not able to utilize the use of their body. Look at Professor, Stephen Hawkins. I mean, the brilliant mind that he had, and that he, utilized his instrument to the fullest capacity. So it doesn't matter what body that you're in. That's quite a heavy question, and one you have to be very careful to answer. But I think we're all brilliant. I think the main device is here, the consciousness and how you use it. I think this is the window to other realities that we can tap into. And I think this is something, again, going back to the system, which is trying to shut us down, because people who use their minds and think outside the box create the most amazing things. And are able to draw the most incredible, perhaps dimensional awarenesses or realities around them, because they're drawn to that light around you. And the system is trying to shut us down, you see, so that we are complacent and that we're scrubbing out these experiences. It's very, very soul destroying.
More questions, Les?
Yeah, I just want to bring one in from myself, actually, which is a rarity. And I think I've asked you this one before, Philip, is do you think the consciousness lives inside your body, or do you think it lives outside the body altogether? Do you think it's something that follows you around, or it's something that's inherently inside the body?
You have a mobile phone. The mobile phone is the physical construct. So the mobile phone is designed to receive a signal and break that signal down to a language that the person using it will understand. So the human body, the biosphere, when it goes through its gestation period, it is coming into a physical vehicle, a physical form. But as the hardware comes in, it has the software attached to it. So with your mobile phone, if you were to destroy or damage your mobile phone, the signal will still remain pure. It will not be damaged, and this signal may adapt to another device available, or it will go back to source. So I believe that consciousness, as we call it, is, and I'm sorry I'm going to say this, is the soul, because people talk of the soul as though it's separate from consciousness. But how can you be anything other than what you are consciously? Because you're consciously aware of self. And in order to be conscious, you have to have consciousness. So I believe that the soul is part of the same thing, and it utilizes its energy within the cells of the body. That's why perhaps the memory or the link that the soul has through the physical hardware carries with it the sum total of other memories from perhaps past lives. And because the brain is only able to download information on a limited flow of awareness, sometimes these other memories sometimes slip through the net of normal processing, as it were. So I believe that, like strings, that attached to us, I believe that consciousness works through and around the body, and especially that's been proven as well with remote viewing experiments, with psychic experiments. People are shocked and horror. Oh, look, he can use his mind. He can read minds. He can remote view. He can heal. He can draw UFOs to him through thought. Well, yes, why not? Because the mind creates realities. The mind is the builder. The mind is the window. It's not imagination. That's a load of rubbish. Imagination is mind consciousness. We all have mind. I hope we do. Anyway.
Well, that leads me on to a follow-on question, really. And you just mentioned it there, Philip. Remote viewing, is that something you do yourself?
No, I have tried it and I failed. I never claim anything. I'm a medium and I deal with information that's downloaded from people that we consider dead. Yeah. So, and I deal with that with a yes and no question, no messing around. So, I deal with that, and I won an award back in. I didn't want to be a medium. I did not want to be a medium. But remote viewing is interesting because the American military performed these secret experiments back in the late 60s, and Ingo Swann, as we know, was part of that operations, which proved to the military establishment that consciousness can survive outside its physical embodiment, and it can go forward or backwards within time, which is interesting. But they shut the experiments down, you see, because most of the psychics, or the trained psychics, because you have to train to be a psychic, it's like anything, learning to walk, learning to draw, whatever, they were discovering a little bit too much, so they had to shut it down. So yes, remote viewing, but no, I've tried it, but I failed, I'm afraid.
Right. Well, that's interesting, that, Philip. No more questions are coming at the moment. So I'll land it over to you, Paul.
Yeah,
And
well, I think we'd like Philip to cover the 2016 experience if you can, or talk a little bit about your book. What would you rather do, Philip?
I'll do the 2016 experience. Now, I have to explain here, I was really awed by this because we had been over some police friends, for an early birthday meal. My brother and I's birthday was a few days later. We were having an early meal, and I drove my brother there. I wouldn't drink. I don't normally drink because I thought, well, I need to drive back. And I think I was working the next day. So my sister and my niece also came along, but they drove separately because they live in Lower Shelton and my niece in Master Mortain, because we then have moved to Kempston in Bedfordshire. So we're no longer in Master Mortain in that village. So we're over there, over their house on the 9th of April 2016, and my niece and my sister decide to leave. I think it was probably about 11:15 at night that they left. And we'd said goodbye, and my brother and I decided to, because my brother doesn't drive, bless him, I drive. We said our goodbyes, and I think it must have been about 5 to 11 that we left. So it was dark, it was cold, very cold night, very dark, starlit night. And I'm coming out from the village of Copel onto the bypass, which leads and then comes off towards Kempston. And as I'm driving towards Kempston, it only takes about 15 minutes at most to get from our friends to our place. We both noticed these three big lights, white lights, hovering in a triangular formation in the air. Now, the first thought that I had, and this is a surprise, people will say, oh, you jumped and thought it was UFOs. No. The first thought that I and Ronald had was that workmen had got their lanterns up and they were doing work in the dark. Well, they were pretty big lanterns, I can assure you. So what happened was that as we drove closer and I came past the traffic lights into a dip and under Cow Bridge, there's a bridge that you have to go under to get up to the other part. I pulled the car over and saw and wound my window down because I wanted to see if there was any sound. There was no sound, and the lights they seemed to be where our house was. They were very big. So my stomach drops. It's that feeling you get when you know there's something not right. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, they're not workmen's lanterns. They are three huge circular lights that are hanging in a triangular formation where our house is. So I start the car, drive onwards and get down to our road. And as my brother and I get out of the car, they are immediately above us. I can still see them in a triangular formation. So when we got out, they're very low, they're above us. Now, at this point, my man bag, I had my mobile phone, was buzzing, and someone was trying to get hold of me. Now, I had a choice then. I either put my hand into the handbag, open it and get it out and answer it, or I watched what was happening. I watched. I chose not to. People make me laugh. They say, didn't you take a photo of it? No, because at that point I wanted to watch them. I wasn't interested in proof or trying to convince other people. I was more interested in what I was seeing that was beyond anything that I can explain. So we're looking at these three lights in the sky. Okay, they are separate objects. It wasn't a whole triangular craft. They were in the position of a triangle. Now the light to the back, the far back, the left, moved towards the light to the front, to the front of the craft. It stopped, didn't touch it. Then it went back again. There was no sound. And then we both watched incredulously as the lights formed into a straight line. So you got 1, 2, 3, and it moved off. And you could measure them with a ruler. Now, what's interesting, going back, Paul, to what you were saying about time, we did not lose time, but I will tell you what happened. When we were observing those crafts, and we observed them very, very closely, there was no sound. Now, where we live down a fairly quiet road, but you can bet your bottom dollar there's always someone walking their dog. There's someone coming down from the pub down the road, or there are cars around. On this night, there were no cars. There were no people walking their dogs. There was no one coming back from the pub. In fact, there was no one. And everything seemed to be like, you know, that feeling of when it's just snowed and there's that quiet feeling. That, and coming back to your point, Paul, in terms of your question with regards to them changing the atmosphere or that was evident. And this is why it made me smile, because I thought, well, yes, now I know that's a fact, because there was no sound. It seemed like there was no sound. It was like you're in a bubble.
Yeah.
And they covered you with this bubble. Now, I remembered before they went off shouting, "Oh my God, look at them. Oh my God, look." And my brother's going, "Shh," because he's the sensible one out of both of us, you know. I'd go running towards a UFO. He'd be calm and relaxed. But there was no one. I said, "Where is everyone? Where is everyone?" There was no one around. Anyway, when they'd gone off, I'd got into the door. My man bag was buzzing. It was my niece. I could see on the phone, Charlie. I opened it and I said, "Are you phoning about UFOs?" And she said, "Have you seen them?" I said, "Well, yes, they've been hovering. Oh, they've been stationary where we drove up and we've just seen them." She said, "Well, I saw them on their way to you, so I was trying to contact you." And she said, "I filmed them." I said, "How did she?" "On my mobile phone." I thought, oh, thank God. So I went upstairs. I did a report on Facebook. It was 11:15 at night on the 9th of April, 2016, sharp. Made the report, and then the film disappeared because my niece put it on the computer and lost it. And when she found it, when I was writing A Passage to Eternity, this one, I put them on Facebook, and then Jason Gleaves, the author and UFO researcher, analysed them, and they are in the next book. Now, what's interesting, a few other things happened after that. I'd done a reading for a guy who came to see me maybe about 3 or 4 months later. Great guy, finished reading, and he had a brown envelope. He said, "I've got something to show you." I said, "What's that?" And he took it. I said, "These are the UFOs that you saw on that night." And I was like, "Oh my God, you've got a photograph of them." Although they weren't in a triangular formation, they were aligned together as like 1, 2, 3. And then, but on the 10th of April, 2016, the very next day, trying to get to terms with what happened, which was beyond, I thought that would make the papers, the news, everything. It made nothing. We had some reports coming through, they'd seen it, and there was a green light apparently, but we didn't see any green light. So the next day, a helicopter comes over to our house. Now, it wasn't a black helicopter, it wasn't a military helicopter, it wasn't the Men in Black, but it was a white helicopter, and I don't think it was a police helicopter, but it came over our house, low over our house, and started to circle. So my brother and I were upstairs, and then we thought, what's all this racket? Because we do all our work in our study area and that, and what's all this racket? Ran downstairs and saw the helicopter. We went into the back garden, small back garden we got, and it was positioned so the two pilots you could see them as it's circling around. 1, 2, 3, and then it went off, and it was a mystery. And I said to Ronnie afterwards, "Do you think," and excuse my French here, but some of those buggers who knows about this has sent these guys so that if anyone asks, "Did you see those UFOs?" and someone will say, "Oh, you mean the helicopter?" "Oh, that was it." Now look at Roswell. People are contradicted with the dates. They don't know what date it was. So so we can all get confused with dates, can't we? I was not. I know where I stood with those dates, but anyone else, I can understand them. God love them. So that is what happened with regards to that, and it was incredible. And that is in the images of that, and the story of that is in the new book that Philip Mantle is bringing out via his Flying Disc Press.
These lights that you saw,
yes,
you said they were low compared to rooftops. How high?
Well, I would say they were probably about 3 houses up. So if you put one house on another and another, that's how low they were. I mean, these guys were big. I mean, you go back into your mind, you go back there, okay, which I have done many, many times, not only with the or with our grandmother or the abduction in 1989, which has never changed and never will change, no matter what someone puts in my mouth, or this, because we're black and white, spade to spade, or this encounter. One of the things that amazed me about this was why? Why are you doing it? Whatever intelligence this is, why are you seeding another puzzle for us to work out? Why not just come down and say, okay, guys, this is what we are. This is what we're about. Why are they playing with us? Because this has created more questions than answers. And I don't understand. It's almost like it's dangling carrots.
Do you think that could be part of the reason? The actual reason being stirring your mind up to make you ask more questions, making you more emotional, making what makes you and what makes your Ron or Ronnie who you are, and searching kind of souls. I mean, it could be just things set in place to set off an emotional response, what they want. I mean, once again, I'm going back to the thing that we've no idea what these intelligences want from us.
No, none at all. And I say to people with my hand on my heart, I don't crave fame, I don't crave fortune, I crave the truth. And when, like you, Paul, you've had these experiences, and Les, well, I know, Les, we had a chat about that, but we're all important keys to this unfolding reality that we're going through. When you have had an experience or experiences, now I'm not one of these people that claims that they've been abducted all the time. No, that was the one. There may have been another one some years ago, but I can't stamp that with that because I've got no way of proving that. The events that led up to that were very bizarre. I can't and will not put words into someone's mouth and say, oh, I was abducted, when I don't know that I had been. So I'm very cautious with data and with facts as they stand. But I had an American couple some years ago telling me that the reason that I had the negative experience was because I was a negative person. And I will tell you now, I am the because these people claim they were being abducted every night of the week, and it's okay. Oh, well, they believe that, that's fine, but I'm not quite sure about that, because when people do have them, it really impacts upon their lives, and very, very strongly. But they said and I am the least negative person my brother is, so they got that bit wrong.
Any more questions, Les?
Well, that is an interesting fact. And as I said before, there may be different factions of what we're dealing with. There may be an intelligence that's mimicking one to the other. We are not far from, I'm sure we have cloned humans. So, won't they be asking the question as clones whether or not they have a soul, and that we as their creators, their masters, the same question must be had. So if there are military who are working with Greys, and I've heard this before, I can only talk from what happened to me and trying to piece the parts together with regards to that puzzle. But I do believe there are different factions of Greys like humans. So, yeah.
Okay, another problem where I didn't have the mic on there, folks, again. This podcast will go down in history.
Don't worry.
As Lezo never bothers to put his mic on. But I think we're on. I think we're on now.
Have we got another question?
We're just going to go for people who've just come onto the live stream. I think we're just going to play the Ronald's artwork video again, Philip, if that's okay. Just to give him another. We're going to give him another plug, and and it'll give you guys a chance to have a drink for a couple of minutes. Okay.
Paul?
Yes?
Wow. Played it again, and it was great. And Ronald's work is absolutely fantastic, Philip. Just a little question about Ronald. He's not on the stream with us tonight, obviously. And how long has Ronald been doing this digital artwork?
Not lot. I'd say roughly about 3 years. I mean, he used
Really?
to draw everything, and I'm an artist, but not as good as him. And I'm not as good as Paul because I've seen his art. But he's really come far with this. He's starting to draw people now, or digitally create people. So he's really happy with that. So I don't have to go far for an artist, you see.
Well, that's brilliant. And just to finish on that, we just got to give a shout out to Jessica Pym, Paul's daughter, who writes and performs the music. And thanks for giving us their consent to use that on Ronald's video today.
Very
Right then,
honest.
yeah. So I'll leave it with the last 10 minutes or so on the podcast, or live stream, I should say, with you and Philip. Take it away, guys. Yeah.
Right then, Philip. I think you've covered your experiences absolutely wonderfully. I think everybody's enjoyed listening to them. But just before we end it, You the Public Deceived,
Yes.
your latest book. I'm intrigued about the chapter. The sinister side.
Yes.
Chapter 5, and what theories did you form, and what conclusions did you come to?
Okay, to the sinister side to sources, and I will point out that the book is coming out from Philip Mental's Flying Disc Press. He's been a real great help to me and my brother, a good man, and it will be coming out later this year. Although it says unavailable on Amazon, it's because they're holding back because of the things that happened at the moment. The sinister side to sources, well, my brother and I have argued this many, many times, because in all the abduction cases, in all the UFO reports, most of them, they haven't really helped us. And a lot of people had suffered under the hands of these so-called aliens, and especially with their crafts. So if there is to be any form of, understanding between us and them, I don't think that's being made via them on an easy level, because they hide within the shadows. As I said, the greys are the ones that intrigue me more than anything, maybe because I interacted, or they rather interacted with me. And because of their prosaic nature and their frightening forms, I wanted to find out, try and face my fear with dealing with them. But the chapter, The Sinister Side to Sources, deals with, those people who had been severely affected through radiation sickness, through burns, through cancer, and that chapter tries to remind us that although we believe that we're dealing with a lot of love and light entities that were very much apparent within the late 50s, because when the Roswell UFO crash occurred, and I do believe that it was something that was not from this world, because if it was an experimental weather balloon, the Mogul balloon, why the hell, if it was that experimental, weren't the military tracking it? They'd forgotten about it. So I believe that the greys have been covered, or there was an intent to cover their reality. And then, of course, these beautiful, wonderful, beings suddenly turned up from certain contactees, as they were called, but we never saw them. We never saw the contactees. They never turned up. They used their spokesperson to talk about them. And then, of course, the greys came back into the fore. So I wanted to show that, we have to be real about this, that, all this love and light. And we're fascinated by UFOs, and I'm sure that there are good ones, but there is also a dangerous aspect. We have to be very careful, because we don't understand them, or they don't want to understand us, but from a distance. So that I wanted to point out the fact that, we have to be very careful when we're stepping into uncharted territory, as it were.
The people who claim that the intelligences, the beings, are all love and light, and let's not detract from the fact that they might be having these experiences, some of them.
Yes.
So if we stay with that, and they may be, some of these people may be having the love and light experience.
Yes.
Do you think it's the same intelligence that's working both parts? So
Well,
the bad experience that I had, the bad experience you had, we've got the same beings, the same intelligence playing a different role, for someone else just because they probably want something else from that person. I don't know. I'm just asking you the question.
Well, Paul, I think that you are very much on the ball with this, and I don't feel that you're far wrong at all. Do you remember, I'm sure everyone knows the film It by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And it used the minds of people to generate their worst fears imaginable. And then, of course, they found out that it was a being from another dimension. So I believe that we in certain locations, certainly that you've mapped, Paul, it would appear that it's coming from a main source of intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe that because maybe there are these other forces around the world doing the same thing. Always reminds me of the film you see with Robbie the Robot, and was it Dr. Morbius, Forbidden Planet? And, you know, all these things that were happening were actually a product of him, that was coming from him. I'm not saying that these things are coming from our individual minds. It must be coming from something else. So, you know, I believe that there are little markers that point us to the fact that this intelligence, and it is intelligent, can't be a very nice intelligence if it's ripping up animals, if it's producing these creatures from folklore, which I believe are true. And the werewolves are one of the things I would never want to meet, because I don't think I'll ever come back outside again. So it seems to be able to play and tease and you know, create this fear. And maybe maybe it feeds from fear. We don't know. We have no way of knowing.
Well, that jumping back then to we don't know what they want from us, and it could be the fear. It could be something that we're producing, a chemical we're producing that they're wanting, and that's why the extreme terror is evoked. Correct. Just likewise, some people might be more apt to be happy and of a better disposition, and they get that interaction. I don't know. And I could be wrong here, and I don't want to upset people, but I have noted that the people who favour, let's say, the love and light. I mean, you use that word. I don't know, but it's good enough. They don't seem to want to entertain the idea that these things could actually not be as nice as what they're thinking.
Yes.
You know, I have noticed that, and it's.
Yeah, and think of this. I used to do these experiments. I would go to work and think, I'm going to be the happiest of men, the happiest of souls. Go to work, and then when I'm so happy, everything worse that could happen brings me down. So I believe that the field of consciousness that we as humans are linked into, when people break away from that mold, it's almost as if the rest of it doesn't want you to leave. It's pulling you back down into that. Now, we're obviously dealing with an intelligence or some type of intelligence which is very interested in those souls or those individuals who break the normal mold, you understand, and they're attracted to them because they know they're different. And maybe that's why they're singled out. We don't know. That's just a one simple hypothesis. That's why people who've never had a belief in UFOs see them, and some people that, you know, that have a belief in everything never see them. It's very weird, but I do believe that this energy feeds from fear. And we do know, we've heard reports as well, other reports, that this fear mongering and this fear building is intent to feed to this intelligence or this omnipresent energy that governs.
Well, Philip, we're getting ready to wind down now. So do you want to tell us about the projects you're working on? And let's plug this book a little bit because, like you said, it's not out just yet. I'm lucky enough to have a copy, guys. Well worth reading. And just tell them roughly when it's going to be out.
Yeah, well, you, as I said, Paul, you wrote the foreword for that book. So I'm very honored because, you know, I see you as a very respected gentleman and you have our greatest respect. The book is due out, we think, perhaps later this year or maybe next year. Philip Mental has correctly held back because of what we're going through at the moment. Things aren't moving, so you can understand. So everything in the industry and the world is being pulled back. So that should be out next year. I am working on another psychic book called Guardians of the Dead, which should hopefully be out later this year. But I shall be working on my next UFO book called Visitors from the Void. And I hope to have that out maybe late next year. But that's going to be a real dig at the Greys to find out more about them. And you know what? I'm not condemning them. You know, maybe it's my understanding that is wrong. And maybe I have to grow and learn with that. We don't know. We've got to look at different aspects. I mean, this is a subject you could talk about for hours and get nowhere fast.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to hand over to Les, because
Thanks, Paul.
I think we've covered quite a lot of ground there, Philip, and it's been a pleasure speaking to you. And I haven't really had to say much. I've loved it. Thank you.
Oh, well, I thank you very much, Paul. I'm very honoured to come on your show, and Les as well. Two great guys. And your daughter's music, I mean, that is incredible. I mean, she'll be writing the scores for films in the future.
She likes what she does. Thank you.
Yeah, bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We've been out twice, me and Bob Brown. I don't know what time we've got, but we went out the last time, I think. Well, we went out last night. I need to say that I'm in a flat and Bob lives 2 floors above me, so we're not sort of breaking any laws here. It's a communal hallway. I see him every day. But the first time we went out, we quite unbelievably got a cryptid report from a guy who said he's only ever had one weird experience in his life, 60 years old, and this was it. And he didn't volunteer it. He thought we were bird watching, and he come up talking to us because of the seabird colony on the cliffs. And when we told him, we didn't go rushing in saying, "Oh, we're looking for these lights in the sky." But when we told him, I know we haven't got time to do this story, Les, but when we told him, he said, "Well, seeing as you're talking about unexplained phenomena, I have seen something strange." It was Bob that prompted the question. He asked him if he'd seen any unusual animals. And I'm so pleased that Bob did ask it, because he was just about to say farewell and on his way. And he stopped, made his dog sit down, and he told us this amazing story. And probably we'll touch on it another time, but very good.
Oh, wow.
Wow. And then I think there's a general question here. This is from Rebecca King. And Rebecca asks, "Hi, Paul and Philip. Do you believe in the law of attraction? And what part do you think that plays in your experiences?" So Philip, do you want to run with that one? Do you understand the question?
Well, it's a bit of a complicated question. I mean, you know, it's like, I don't think I've ever deliberately wanted to draw this into my life, but there was an area that I won't go into where we spent a lot of time researching and trying to get these things to us, and we were successful on one occasion. But I don't know. I can't really answer that question.
I think once you've been touched by the phenomena, even a skeptic, a debunker, they have some kind of sighting, or once you've been opened up to the reality, it does appear that you do see more, you do experience more, and that's not blindly seeing these things. I think it actually happens.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. I think time's up, guys. We are going to play out with Ronnie's artwork again. So I know everybody's interested in seeing the video again. And it's been great to have you on the show, Philip. Paul, it's great to host you as well from the Digital Creations team here. And thanks to Leslie Kirby for giving us all the question inputs tonight. Obviously, the questions come in that fast that we can't always monitor them in real time. So thanks, Leslie. And it remains to be seen. It remains for you guys to say goodbye.
Thank you
very much. And like you said,
Paul.
Thank you, Philip, Les, and Leslie. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless you both.